and welcome to another session of our EpiDoc training program, for which you see a link at the bottom of the screen. And in this session, Gabriel Bodard is going to show how to encode the origin date and other dates in EpiDoc. So please, Gabby.
Great, thank you, Elena. So yes, I'm going to talk specifically about the encoding of the date of origin of the object or text in an EpiDoc file. To put it into context, there's a whole series of elements in the MS-DESK section, the manuscript description section of an EpiDoc file that there are separate tutorials about. The part that we're talking about for this section is in the section called origin, which contains these two elements, origin place and origin date, and it's origin date that we're talking about today. A lot of the elements and attributes that we'll be talking about in reference to the date of origin of an object or text are also valid for other uses of date in EpiDoc, such as dates mentioned in a text, dates of finding, those sorts of things. So a lot of the elements and attributes will be the same, but I'm going to be talking specifically about the date of origin in the examples I give in this presentation. So the simplest thing to explain about this is that the expression of the date of origin of an object, such as, ascribing it to the 3rd century, is simply placed inside that origin date element as text inside that tag. The further information about that can then be added as attributes. So 3rd century BC, for example, you can tag as not before -300, not after -201, if you're being particularly pedantic about what 3rd century means. These are some of the key attributes that are available, as I say, in all dating elements. I say you have to be fairly pedantic to say that a 3rd century BC object must be not before -300 and not after -201. Notice that the minus in these dates refers to BCE. It's a negative date. This is how dates are recorded in the standard that is used here. And note also that dates always have to be a 4-digit number, even if the date is, in this case, 300. There has to be a 0 before it. If you're talking about the date for CE, you'd have to say 0004. Okay, so it has to be a 4-digit number. So in this case, because we're saying that the range from -300 to -201 is a relatively arbitrary range, that is to say, we don't think that by saying this is definitely 3rd century, that it could not be the 31st of December 301, but it could be the 1st of January 300. We say, therefore, that this precision attribute with a value of medium simply expresses the fact that this is an arbitrary block of text. For purposes of searching and sorting and so forth, we'll treat them as real dates, but nevertheless, it's an arbitrary set of dates. It's specifically that it's approximate. It's just that it's not particularly concrete. That precision attribute can take 3 values. High, which would mean I mean these dates, which in which case, if we mean these dates, really we omit that, which is why I've crossed out that line in the description there. So we'd never use high. Medium means it's an arbitrary block of dates, such as a century, a half century, quarter century, or something similar. And low, precision equals low, means that this is an approximate date, or the kind of date that you would write circa before in a traditional edition. So a couple more examples to explain a couple more features of the dating system in TEI, which EpiDoc uses. This date here is a bit more concrete. If we've said this must have been created between December the 11th, 20 and December the 10th, 19 BCE, because it has a written date, a consular date or similar that we know date to those years, to those days of the month. We can be a bit more specific in our dating. We're no longer just dating it to a century. So we can say not before 11th of December 20, not after 10th of December 19 BCE. Both of those, you notice again, are negative dates. However, in this case, there is one additional problem, which is these dating expressions, all of these dating attributes use something that is called an ISO standard for dates. And ISO, the ISO 8601 standard, explicitly refers to Gregorian and proleptic Gregorian dates. When we say the 11th of December 20 BC as classicists, we're almost certainly using the Julian calendar. If we talk about things in the 5th century BC, we're using a proleptic Julian calendar. That's to say the Julian calendar didn't yet exist, but we're using it as if it did. We're counting backwards from there, rather than the Gregorian calendar, which would be used for modern history. And some disciplines might use the Gregorian calendar proleptically, going way back, thousands of years into the past for known dates. But classics doesn't. Classics uses the Julian calendar going back. So technically, saying minus 20, 12, 11, meaning the Julian date 11th of December is incorrect. And if you were to use this for a mathematical calculation of some kind, if this were relevant to astronomical features and movements, it would be several days out, potentially, from between the two calendars. So if we want to be absolutely correct in here, excuse me, we have to say that we are using the Julian calendar. And to do that, we can't use the not before attribute anymore, because the not before attribute has to be in the Gregorian calendar. And also there are some features such as leap years. So you can't say February the 29th in a year that is not a leap year in the Gregorian calendar in that attribute, whereas it might be a leap year in the Julian calendar. And so you'd want to be able to tag that. So instead we use this not before custom, in which you can put things which are invalid as Gregorian dates, and simply say that the dating method is the Julian calendar. In this case, we're pointing, as you can see from the hash character in front of the string, we're pointing to a definition of the Julian calendar somewhere. And that could be a definition in our own document, or it could be you could point out to a definition in Wikidata or something similar. So if you think you will ever care about dates, or if you just like to get things correct rather than fudging slightly, and you want to use a date where the difference between the Julian calendar and the Gregorian calendar is significant, then you'll need to be a little bit more pedantic and say that I'm not using the ISO date feature, I'm using a date feature that we've invented, and it refers to the Julian calendar, not the Gregorian calendar. A bit more on the level of precision. We've already had an example of that with this. Here's another example where the text string simply says late 4th century, and so we have completely arbitrarily decided that late 4th century is going to be sorted in a date list as between 367 and 400, dividing the century equally into 3 thirds, but again we say precision medium. These numbers are arbitrary. We talked about that a bit already, and very often we will have dating criteria. We'll say this is late 4th century, and we know because of the lettering and the nomenclature in the text, and that's the attribute we use for that is evidence, and those technically are a free string, free text attribute, so you can put any string of characters in there, but it is useful, I think, to have a controlled vocabulary of types of evidence, of types of dating criteria, and indeed, once you have that, you no longer need to say the dating criteria in plain text in your document, because they're there in the element attribute value and can be supplied in your final edition using XSLT. EpiDoc offers a partial controlled vocabulary of dating criteria. It's that attribute is what's called enumerated in TEI terms, which means that you can use something from this list, but it is an open list. So those are the values that are offered, but you can invent your own value if none of those are appropriate for this particular kind of dating. So those are strongly recommended to use values that other people have used. It makes it easier for cross-corpus comparison and so forth. So just a couple more examples, 3 final examples. The first one is a text that is dated to a single year. And so again, we can say that it's the year 212. It probably doesn't matter too much if we're saying that it's a year, whether we're using the Julian or Gregorian calendar. So maybe we won't bother saying that. We'll say evidence internal and so forth. Second example, an internal date. The text, the inscription or the papyrus itself gives the date. It says year 111 Faufi 21. So we can translate that. We know that that is the 18th of October in 80 CE, because year 111 must be an Actian date. It can't be a regnal year, because no ruler ever reigned for 111 years, as far as we know, at least. So again, we can record this as both the internal date, and we can say that this is the 18th of October, 80 CE evidence internal, okay, with the full information in there. Again, 18th of October, 80 CE is a Julian date that we've translated that to. So you either have to say that it's Julian and use the custom attribute. Notice here we're using the when attribute rather than not before, not after, because it's a single date we're talking about. And we say dating method Julian. Or if you were from a different tradition that didn't want to use the Julian calendar, you would simply convert Faufi 21 of year 111 to a proleptic Gregorian date instead, which would be a very slightly different date. It might be a few days out, and record that in the when attribute, and you wouldn't need to say custom anymore in that case. Third example, you have a period which is partly fixed. Okay, so you have something vague like in the first generation after Caracalla's citizenship edict of 212. We know that from the nomenclature. That's a date that we can fairly concretely say is not before 212, because that's when the citizenship edict was passed, and within a generation of, it's so vague we don't really want to say what that means, but let's say for purposes of searching that you don't want this inscription to appear if someone is looking for late 3rd century inscriptions, for example, because we think it's from roughly the first half. So we might say, and again, these are not numbers that we want to print as text, but for purposes of internal sorting and searching and so forth, we want to give a not before and a not after. But in this case, we mean something slightly different. By the 212, we mean it could not be 211, right? It could be 212, it could not be 211. By 250, we don't mean that it could not be the 1st of January 251, but it could be the 31st of December 250. We mean, in that case, it's a precision low date, right? So we've got 2 attributes, one of which is precision high, and the other of which is precision medium, rather, not low. In this case, we can't simply use the attribute to say precision medium, because that would say both 212 and 250 were precision medium. So instead, we have to use a slightly more complex feature, and there will be, I think, a presentation talking about these slightly more complex features of using precision and certainty. But what we're saying here is inside the ORIG date, we put a precision element which has which matches only the not after attribute of ORIG date, not any of the other 3 attributes. And it says that attribute has precision medium. I'll just leave that there for a second, just to sort of digest it. As I say, it doesn't matter too much what to understand that now, because that'll be explained more in another feature. But if you wanted to say something, and if you wanted to say something, one of them was precision medium, one of them was precision low, or something like that, you could put two precision elements in there, one matching not before and the other matching not after, for example. So just in summary, here are some of the attributes that we use on ORIG and also on a bunch of other date elements. If you have a single year or a single date, or both not before and not after, if you have a span of dates, note that all three of those attributes are ISO dates, so they have to refer to the Gregorian calendar. The custom set of attributes, so any of those attributes with -custom added at the end, plus the dating method attribute allow us to use the Gregorian or the Julian or any other calendar system we want. We could use, ancient Egyptian calendar systems, Mayan calendar systems, or whatever in those custom attributes, as long as we pointed out that we were doing so. Precision allows us to say whether these dates are relatively firm, which we don't need to say anything about, whether these dates are relatively arbitrary, or whether they are specifically approximate, which is something slightly different, medium and low respectively. The evidence attribute, a semi-constrained list, as I explained. Just wanted to point out that the TEI definition of the ORIG date element given at the URL there has quite a lot of both explanation of all these attributes and features and others that I haven't mentioned, and also a few examples of how that works. The second URL given there is in another page in the TEI guidelines, is specifically a page explaining this features, the custom dating and the dating method, and there's several examples of that. And that's a page that the EpiDoc community had a fairly big, fairly heavy hand in designing and coming up with examples for. So that all the examples on that page and the attributes explained on that page are very specific to EpiDoc's use of dating. And the final URL there is pointing to the Godot project, which is all about encoding ancient dates, especially dates as they are given in the text. So that example of the Egyptian year, the Egyptian date in the Actian year would be explained in the relevant page of the Godot project. So I think that's all I want to say about original dating. Anything you want to add, Irene?
No, it was perfect. Thank you, Gabby.
Okay, thank you.